Hi, I'm Bill Fukui. When Candace Crowe had asked me to present a course during this I believe section of the FFAS meeting, I really didn't know, this was a challenge, and mainly because I think as it relates to practice management, it really does boil down to how you develop a belief and carry that through everything that you do, because so much of what we do is founded on core beliefs. And I think the one thing that I wanted to, when we think about core beliefs, so much of that is built in our youth and when we were younger, and how we develop beliefs many times stick with us for a long time. I use the example of Susie Orman. How many of you are familiar with Susie Orman? Yeah. Um, and when Susie first came out, this is long before she was, on TV and had multiple books written, etc. And Susie became Susie. I read her first book, and one of the things that she said in her first book that resonated with me was she had asked, "What was your first memory of money?" And I can certainly remember what that was for me because on a farm, we had to, as kids, in order for us to have any spending money, we actually had to grow our own uh, crops or products and sell them, and whatever we sold was supposedly our money. But my first experience of what that money was as soon as we got paid, my dad quickly ran us to the bank and we deposited that money. So, needless to say, I was kind of like, wow, really, all that work and I get nothing? That's kind of, but any case, that does still affect how I treat money today and my belief in money and how I manage money. And so those core beliefs that start with us so early are things um, that really should drive us and control what we do in life moving forward. And it will affect our success many times in our professional as well as in our personal lives. Um, and so, one of the beliefs I wanted to share with you today, and this is also a core belief of mine, and where that started was this movie, It's a Wonderful Life. Most of you are familiar with it and probably seen it, during the holidays. And just so you know, in my family, my kids, I forced them to watch this every year, every Christmas in their memory. Is this has to be a part of it because every holiday season when that came out, we had to watch it as a family, and they didn't really understand why, but they definitely knew it was an important movie to me and the message behind it. And if you can kind of bear with me, even though you're maybe familiar with it, it is a story about a young man named George Bailey who grew up in a fairly depressed city and town. And this is a young man with great aspirations that he was going to grow up and travel the world. He was going to build skyscrapers. He was going to go places that people in his town never even heard of, and do things that was, monumental and big and make a statement with his life. And so he had all these dreams, and in the midst of all those dreams, unfortunately, life happens, and his father dies, and he ultimately has to take over the family business. And in dealing in that family business, he has to deal with this old curmudgeon miser business owner who owns probably half, if not more, most of the town that he lived in, Mr. Potter. And this is a scene where Mr. Potter, who is being told by his accountant that the building and loan that George Bailey now runs and manages is now making a dent in his profits, and that um, he is becoming a thorn in their side as a business. So um, he is, you know, seemingly to be doing okay, and life seems to be going along okay, even though he didn't actually go out and accomplish all those things that he as a young man hoped he would do. But in that process, to his not to his doing, in fact, his quote bumbling uncle had misplaced about $8,000, and in that process, as a building and loan, he was now financially responsible for that lost money, which he didn't have. So he was actually facing, the loss of his business, and definitely jail time, which really wasn't anything that he had done or caused it. So in a fit of desperation, he stands over a bridge, overlooking a river, and he contemplates jumping over because he now realizes he has a $5,000 life insurance policy, and he's actually worth dead, more dead than he is alive. And so he's contemplating this, taking his life, and in the middle of this process of doing that, his guardian angel Clarence sees him and comes up with this idea of jumping in the river before him, knowing that George would jump in purely just to save him, not to take his own life. And in doing so, he does. He saves George Bailey. And while he's, uh, you know, trying to dry off after sitting in the river, and they have this little stove in this little lighthouse, he says, I saved you. And George Bailey says, no, I saved you. He says, no, you were contemplating taking your life. And I knew if I jumped in, you'd save me. And so you did. And so I did save you. And he goes, that's um, kind of a thing. And he's like, but Clarence says, you really shouldn't think about that, taking your own life. That's not, you shouldn't do that. And George agrees and eventually says, you know what, you're right. I just wish I wasn't born at all. And so Clarence grants him that wish of never having been born at all. And in that process, what follows is George experiences life, what it would be like had he not been there. And all the people that he had touched, all of a sudden, their lives were no longer the same. And quite honestly, not as good as when he was there. Um, so he eventually, realizes uh, that it really is that his life did make a difference, that he impacted all these other people in his life, and that life really is worth living. And eventually, all these people come out of the woodwork, and contribute monies to help him pay back that $8,000, and certainly a lot more. And his brother flies in, and he basically gives a toast to his big brother George, who is the richest man in town. And great story, and it really is a heartwarming story. Uh, but there's several messages, and one of the messages that my kids and everybody talks about is this everybody's life makes a difference and that you touch a lot of people and you don't even realize it. And I agree with those things. But the one message I walked away from that was that George Bailey had given up and sacrificed throughout this entire movie all the things that he wanted for the benefit of others without expecting anything in return. And it was through those acts of kindness and that helpful spirit that the town was not going to let him fail. That he had done some things where that came back and paid him back in spades. Is that this whole concept of a helpful spirit should be at the core of how we run our practice, run our business, run our teams, and ultimately how we can have a more successful life. A helpful spirit has to be at the core of all of those things. And that's really what I wanted to cover today. And so when we think about, you know, uh, you know, the internet and how we affect other people, one of the things we have to realize is that from a practice management standpoint, part of our responsibility is recruiting and surrounding ourselves and our team members with other like-minded people who share that helpful spirit. So if we want to surround ourselves with those types of helpful spirits, we have to do the kinds of things that attract those kinds of people. And part of what we want to do is if you think about it, is that we put all this resources and time and money into trying to attract patients online. Yet we really don't think that a lot of the stuff that we have out there is really what our potential employees are seeing too. And we attract the kind of employees that we push out there. The messaging and the kind of practice that we are will attract a certain type of employee. And if we really want those types of helpful spirits in our practice, we really need to go out of our way to recruit them. And so a lot of the posts that we put out there can't just be for uh, patients or prospective patients and recruitment of patients, but for recruitment of higher quality, higher caliber, uh, helpful spirits that we want to be participating long term in our practice. We're also finding that consumers out there, um, and this is obviously important as well, it's the other side of it. It's the patients that we're dealing with. And the internet is crucial in terms of how we communicate and how we project onto those audiences. And one of the studies that are, it's across the board, is that patients that are frustrated with a practice or patients that are unhappy, it's not the doctor or even the exam or the outcomes. It's usually the the communication, the experience, the relationship that they have with their providers and with their staff members. In fact, this last study is that amongst the unhappiest patients, and these are the patients typically posting bad reviews, they are the ones that cite communication frustrations as the primary underlying frustration with that practice. So kind of keep that in mind is you need to leverage your communication, whether it's email, whether it's your social media, whether it's your blogging, e-newsletters, those types of things, all of the ways that you communicate with your online audience will affect how they perceive you and how you communicate with them. And there's no question that online reviews have become the single most important marketing element that you can control based on the quality and care and the communication of your practice. Um, at the end of the day, marketing can't save a bad product. Marketing can only help enhance those practices that are doing things well and doing things right. So kind of keep that in mind is that the internet is really there to help those helpful spirited practices, both in terms of the people as well as the surgeon. And it starts from the top down. Your surgeon can't be there just purely to make money. A lot of what they're doing, coming into the office, and why they do what they do is for a reason, and a lot of those things have to be communicated not only just with patients but in your marketing and communicated when you're bringing in new employees, and communicating those kinds of things that you're expecting from them. It will absolutely reflect into the experience that your patients have with your practice. And when we're asking patients for reviews, and for example, a lot of practices are uncomfortable even asking for reviews because it makes them feel like they're selling something. Well, I don't want you to think of asking for a review as a sale. What you're really trying to do is if you really understand what happens when people post review, think about yourself. The last time you posted a positive review that you wanted to help somebody, and say what a great job they did, how did that make you feel when you pressed that submit button or post the review button? Made you feel good, didn't it? Made you feel powerful. Made you feel like you were participating in that business and contributing to the success of it. Well, that's no different with people in your office. They love to help you and they want to participate in your practice. Posting a review and giving them the opportunity to do that is a tremendous opportunity for them to participate and continue to develop a stronger relationship with your practice, and that helpful spirit helping them do that so that they can help you as well. I wanted to kind of take this full circle and also kind of um, really make it more personal. And I'm going to share a story with you that why my kids didn't realize why that movie was so important to me. But I'm going to share that with you now. When I was in eighth grade, uh, I'm a little older now, but when I was in eighth grade, um, we had a fire. My dad owned a greenhouse business, and that's how we made money. We had a fire at the greenhouse, and it burned down, over half of the crop. Well, it didn't take a rocket scientist, even an eighth grader at that time, can realize that financially we're in a tough situation. How are we going to pay our bills for the rest of the year when half of our crop is burned down to the ground? Um, so a couple of weeks after the fire, I went down to my basement and where my dad had a small office, and he was in there. And I went to him and I asked him, I said, Dad, are we going to be okay? And of course, he was, pretty calm, and he had reached over in his desk and in his top drawer. He pulled out an envelope. And in that envelope was a stack of checks that he kind of laid out, and he kind of showed me them. And kind of keep in mind, this was about 40 years ago. There were checks in there for 5, 10, 20. There was a check in there for $25,000. And if you added up all the checks in that envelope, I mean, it was more than what we made in probably 2 years. And I asked him, I said, where did all this come from? He says, these were checks from competitors, from customers, from friends of the family, from even the bank had given him a check. He didn't even ask for the loan. Um, but these people came out of the woodwork to help my dad because he truly was a very helpful spirit. Went out of his way to help all these people, and we were not very rich. I mean, we grew up. I grew up on a farm in a bedroom that I had to share with three older brothers in upstairs attic, and that was our bedroom. Uh, and so we didn't have a lot of money, but my dad did have that same helpful spirit, and coincidentally, he shared the same name. He was George as well. Um, well, 10 years ago, my dad had passed. And in going through all those papers, that you go through, I found those checks. And I took that envelope of checks and I went to the families that gave them to my dad. Some of the people had already passed, but so I gave them to the other family members. But I went through all the checks and I gave them back to the families and to the people that had given them to my dad. And I did share with him that dad had kept these with him till the day he died. Um, and my kids never knew that. My kids never knew that he had these checks and that we went through all of this. And all these people came out of nowhere to help him um, until this year. My youngest daughter, who was a first year medical student at the University of Colorado, um, brilliant child, even though, I mean, of course, I say that as a parent, but she's so much smarter than I will ever be. Um, and I know she's going to be successful. And successful not because she's smart, and not because she's going to be a doctor. She is going to be successful because she shares that same helpful spirit. As a 16-year-old, she had gone through cancer treatment, and it was with that spirit that she uh, found really the urge and the calling to to be in medicine. And her goal isn't to make a lot of money. She is the worst at taking care of money, but she cares about people and she wants to make a difference in people's lives. She truly is a helpful spirit. She will be successful not because she's smart and that she's going to make money. It's because she has a helpful spirit, and it's with that spirit that we as a as an industry and you as a practice provider need to be looking at how you're providing services to your patients, and how you're working with your team members, because a helpful spirit is at the core of what makes for success in all phases of our lives. And we got to pass it on. Thank you very much.